Hello everyone, welcome back to the ABAP Cloud Backend Developer Series, and this is lesson 8. In the previous lessons we have looked at CDS views, internal tables, object-oriented ABAP, database operations, but today we move into something much more fun and we enter into the world of business objects, behavior definitions, behavior implementation, entity manipulation language. So the entity manipulation language, if there's still time, we'll go into it, otherwise we'll look at it in the next video. So by the end of this lesson, you understand what a business object really is, how to analyze a business object, how projections and interfaces work, and how to modify data using entity manipulation language in the ABAP Cloud. So this will be in the next video. So as part of the modern ABAP programming, you will have to come across business objects. So what is a business object? Now, in ABAP Cloud, we no longer just think in terms of tables or select statements or update statements. So instead, we talk in terms of business objects. And a business object actually represents something that is real in business. For example, you can see a travel agency, or an example also can be a sales order, or an example can also be a customer. Another example is a purchase order. So it is not just a table like we know. So there are three things involved. It is data, behavior, and rules. So whenever I think of business object, it involves three things: data, behavior, and rules. Now, a business object actually has two main parts. The first part is what we call the data definition, which is CDS view, core data services views. And what this does is that the view defines what field exists. It also defines what the structure will look like, and it defines also what the keys will be. So for example, if you have a view, you can have fields like agency ID, the name, the street, and the country code. And when you talk about the business object, the second part is behavior definition. Now, when you talk about behavior definition, this defines what you can do with the object. Okay, so you've defined a view, CDS view, for the business object. So what can the business object do? This is what the behavior is all about. So can you create, can you update, or can you delete? So these are the things that the behavior definition will be responsible for: to create, to update, to delete. Likewise, the business definition also involves validations. Will there be validations, determinations, and actions? Okay. Now, this is where business logic rules are defined. So the behavior definition basically is where we define the rules that governs our business logic. So to understand further what a business object is, this tutorial is more about project-based tutorial. So we are going to be building our own business object from scratch. So what we will do is that we are going to create a CDS view, then we are going to create a business object, a behavior definition, a behavior implementation, and also finally we'll manipulate it using entity manipulation language. So if you want to understand the RAP and modern ABAP Cloud, so this lesson is very important. And the first step we're going to do is we're going to create a database table, the table that we are going to be using for this demo. And let's imagine that we are building a simple product management system. So let's go to Eclipse. So in Eclipse, I will just select my package, and then I create a table. So we are creating a database table. So right click, new ABAP repository object. You can just see database, and database table comes up. You click on database, click on next. So let's give it the name SAPVIC products. So we'll create a transparent table for this our product management system. Description, product table, click on next. And then we have the key client, and we can enter the fields for the table. So these are the fields for the table: product ID, name, price, currency, created by, system username, created at, the timestamp. So of course it's better to use data elements defined, but I'm using built-in data types here. All right, so let's save and activate our table. So let's just see maintenance allowed here. Let's change here to allowed so that we can do maintenance on the table. So this is a transparent table, and then you can see the description here, product table type, product table. So let's save, Ctrl S, then Ctrl F2, syntax error check, then you activate, Ctrl F3. All right, so our table is activated, but remember that in ABAP Cloud, we don't access tables directly. Okay, so now you have a table, you do not have to access it directly. So that is where business object comes into the game. So we are going to now build business objects. And before you actually build a business object, you need to have a root CDS view. We've covered CDS views in the previous video in lesson 5. So if you are new to this channel, please go ahead and watch the lessons. Lesson 5, we also covered CDS view in that lesson 5. So, and like I explained initially, a business object has what? Two parts. We have the CDS views. So that is why we need to create a CDS view, and then we also have the behavior definition. So now let's go ahead to create our CDS view called data service that is related to the table we just created. So let's go to Eclipse. So what you can do is you can right click on your package and then go to new. You can, or rather we look for data definition. So click on data definition, click on next. So we are creating a data definition. So let's give it the name SAPVIC. So we can say, so we can give the name SAPVIC, our products, core data services for products. Let's click on next. So normally you select a transport request for this, but we are working with free version on the cloud, so we don't have access to create this transport request. But in real application, you need to create a transport request. You click on this and create a new request. So here we just click on finish. So now, so you see define view entity for SAPVIC our product. So select from data source. So here you are going to write the name of the database table that you are selecting from as a source. So the name of our table was what? SAPVIC underscore product. So let's copy it and paste it here. All right. So now the next thing we need to do is to fill in the fields that I want to see from the view, or that I want to see on the view. So let's copy this, copy and paste this right here. All right. So in the view, we have this error here. Okay. And the error is because it's related to the currency reference for the price field. Okay, so now we need to properly annotate the price. So it says semantics.amount.currency code currency. All right, so that means my price is pointing to the currency, to the unit of measurement. So if you are dealing with maybe things like weight, then you also need to point to the unit of measurement. So one more thing, let's add the key here. So that's how we're getting error below. So it's a key product ID. So once again, what did we just do here? We defined the structure of our business object. So this is the definition part, but right now it is just data. Remember that we also need to define the behavior and also need to define the rules and also the logic. Okay, so the next step is now to create the behavior definition. So behavior definition will define what the business object can do. Can you create with the business object? Can you update? Can you delete? Are there validations? Are there determinations? And are there actions? I'll also explain this as we proceed in the video. So now in the interesting part, so let's right click on our package. So I'm using this package here. Let's right click and let's go to new, other ABAP repository objects. So let's search for behavior definition. So it's type in core data services, then under that you select the behavior definition. So let's click on next, give a description for it. So we are doing for, let's say, behavior definition, behavior for products, and the root entity will point to our CDS view that we just created as our root entity. Okay, so these are root entities SAPVIC our products. So let's go back and activate. So let's syntax check and then activate this. So let me also activate the table, Now let's create it again. Behavior definition, click on next. So root entity, let's search for it again. Now it appears. So we now select the CDS view that we created, and now you have implementation tab. You can see managed and unmanaged. So we'll look at this also, look at the explanation of this in the next slides. But now let's just create managed. So, all right, so let's click on next. All right, then we get an error here. SAPVIC underscore R product is not a root entity. And the reason for this error is because we need to specify root in the definition. So let's go back to our CDS view. So right here, we need to indicate that this is going to be the root entity. So just type in root here and let's control save again. Syntax check and then activate. So this is activated. One more time, let's create the behavior definition. So let's right click. So select behavior definition next. So behavior for product. Now select the root entity, SAPVIC R underscore products. Click on OK. So now we can proceed. Click on next. Click on finish. So because selected managed implementation, you see managed here. This is the class name. We also have authorizations, create, update, delete, and the field. Now let's understand the behavior definition. So let's simplify this class, this object we created now. So when you open any behavior definition, you'll see something like define behavior, all right? And then behavior for this root view, which is our CDS view. And of course, we need to give an alias name. So the alias name is very important because when using entity manipulation language later, you must use the alias name to access the entity. So let's give an alias name. So now inside the behavior definition, you will see something like this: create, update, delete, specify the fields or the field. So this means that the object will allow this operation. The business object will allow you to create, to update, and to delete. So if you try to update without update being allowed, you'll get a syntax error. There's also validation checks. Okay, so in the business object, there will also be validation checks, and validation check if data is correct. For example, email must be valid, name must not be empty, country code must exist. So you define validations in the behavior definition. So, but you implement them in the behavior implementation class. Okay. There's also determinations. So these automatically change values. For example, automatically calculate total price or automatically set the status of a field. And there are also actions. Okay. Actions are like special operations. These are not the create, update, or delete. So these are special operations. For instance, you want to approve purchase order, or if you are using a flight agency system, you want to cancel flight. So these are actions. Confirm booking. These are actions. So all these, you can define them in what? The business behavior. So these are business specific behaviors. After you have defined the business behaviors, you also need to define what we call behavior implementation. So there are two implementation types. The first one is the managed implementation type. Okay. So like you see when we're creating, you see the option to either select managed or unmanaged implementation. So for the managed implementation, the system will automatically handle the create, the update, and the delete. So you only need to implement the custom logic for validations. So this is even the modern recommended approach. While the unmanaged implementation, you must implement everything manually. So it's more complex, it's used in advanced cases, and the implementation is also done inside a special class called behavior pool. All right. So let's go back to so let's add validation to our behavior. So you can just say validation. So the name or the variable validate price on save. So whenever I save, create or update, then it needs to validate the price. So this is how to add validation. We have added validation. So I'll open another project and show you determinations and actions. So this is a behavior definition for a flight agency. So you can see here we have use create, use updates, use delete. And also you see here that there are actions here. Use action resume, use action edit, use action activate, use action discard, use action prepare. So these are all actions that you define in the behavior. Now you can also see this another managed implementation. So another behavior. So right here you can see the create, update, and delete. These are the fields of interest. These are the actions: resume, edit, activate, discard. Now for validations, you can see that the added validations here. Validations, we give the validation upon save, then validation. So right here we also create our own validation. So in a nutshell, what we are doing in our business object behavior definition is that our objects we allow our objects to create, to update, and to delete. So now we can also say that the fields that will be read-only, the fields that will not allow create, updates, and delete. Product ID, you cannot create product ID. You can also add other fields. So let's add created by as read-only because you don't want someone to edit or update this. So this should be automatically created by the system, or you can only read it. And also the time at which it was created should only be read-only fields. All right. So, and then we have this validation, validate price. That means whenever someone creates or updates, so create or updates, the price must pass a rule. So there must be a rule that must be passed. But where do we write that rule? That's the next important question. And that rule will be inside the behavior implementation class. So we need to create a behavior implementation class. You see that ADT already automatically created that for us, but it does not yet exist. So we can create it. Let's see if we do control exclamation mark, then create behavior implementation class, double click on this. The open behavior definition is not active and unlocked. To create behavior information, the behavior definition has to be active. Okay, so let's save this. Let's save the behavior definition, check for syntax error, no errors found, activate this, Ctrl F3. So since it's activated, we can go ahead to create the implementation for our behavior definition. So let's just control exclamation mark to give us a help functionality. So double click on this, and now we have this pop up to create a new behavior class implementation. So yeah, let's click on next, click on finish. So what we are creating now is called the behavior pool. Okay, now we are inside the behavior pool. Let me minimize this. All right, so inside it, you also see a local class. So right here, this is a local class, LHC_products. And now we need to implement the validation method. Remember, we created it validate price in our behavior definition. So these methods comes automatically, leave them as they are. So now when we go to the local class inside the behavior pool class, you can see the method here that we need to implement. We need to implement the validate price. So here you can just write the functionality of how you need to validate the price. Okay, I'm getting some IntelliSense here. So I'll leave the validate price method code in the comment section so that you can easily copy and paste it in your code. Basically what the code is doing, that if you have a product table and you want to make sure that when you save, no one should save a product with a price of 0 or less. So that's where we create an error here. Price must be greater than 0 if price is less than or equal to 0. Okay, so basically the first part here, read relevant product instances. What's happening here is that we are asking SAP to read product information from our database. So read entities from this our table, and the entity has this alias products. Remember that we gave the alias name products to this our table. And then which fields are we interested in? We are interested in the price field. So if you want more fields, you can add, but since we are saying validate price, we don't want any other column, right? Then with corresponding keys. So the keys tells us which specific products we need to check. And then the results will be stored inside this internal table, LT_products. So results is a keyword. And then if anything goes wrong with the reading, that information will go to ls_read_field. All right. You use this keyword field, and then you define the internal table. So this is where the validation goes. This is where the checks takes place. So if the price is less than 0, output this message, price must be greater than 0. So this method will run automatically during save, because we said the validate should run upon save. If we go to validate price on save, so that method will run automatically when we save. So if price is 0 or negative, the system will throw an error. And this is actually modern ABAP Cloud validation. There's no need for manual commit, no manual checking outside, and the framework will handles it. So let's save and activate. Ctrl S to syntax check, Ctrl F2, and then Ctrl F3 to activate. So now another important thing that we need to take note of is the concept of business object projection and business object interface. Okay, so business object projection, you should never directly access a business object. Okay, so we have created our business object, we've created the behavior, we have created the implementation, but do not access it directly. And that is why we need to use business object projection and business object interface. So for projection, that's for the UI services, and for interface, that is for ABAP coding. So business object projection is actually used by Fiori apps and OData services to consume your business object behavior, and then it defines what fields are exposed and what operations are allowed. For the business object interface, this we use it inside the ABAP code, and also is used by the entity manipulation language, and it provides stable access and released API-like access. Okay, so what we need to do now is that we are going to create an interface, business object interface. We need to create a new data definition. So let's right click on this, go to our other ABAP repository, data definition, click on next, and then we give it SAPVIC_I. This will stand for interface, and just say product interface. So referenced object, on reference object, let's select our database table. So let's select this, click on next. So let's select define view entity, then we'll make adjustments to the code, finish. So right here, define, we're going to say define roots view entity. This is the name of the interface we are trying to create. So inside the interface that we are creating, say define root view entity SAPVIC_I_product. So now we have the provider, contracts, then transactional_interface. So this is what the business object projection is using. So as projection on our database table, all right, and these are the fields: key field, primary key, product ID, name, price, currency, created by, created at. Okay, so when you see provider, contracts, transactional_interface, this is referring to the ABAP, okay, the ABAP interface, that is the business object interface. So there's another one. If you see provider, contract, transactional query, then that refers to the business object projection. Okay, so but right here we are using the interface, so we can remove this. Okay, so when writing ABAP code, always use business object interface. All right, so let's save, Control S rather, and Control F2, syntax check, Control F3 to activate. So now we have the interface created. Next thing we need to do is to create behavior definition for the interface. Okay, now so let's create the behavior definition for the interface. You can just go to your core data services, you see behavior definitions, just right click here, new behavior definition. All right, so the description, you can just say the product interface, then click on next. So our root entity will now be our interface that we created. Now this time around it's not our table, so we're going to use the interface, this one, SAPVIC_I_product. Select OK, then next, and finish. So we see here projection. So I will just edit it and just add interface at the top, because just give an alias. Let's say products, I_products to be interface for the products. So Control S, and let's F2, and then activate. So now this is our released API. So if tomorrow we change the internal business projection, the interface remains stable, and this is enterprise level design. So now, so before we go on to the next part, which is like the final part, entity manipulation language, let's add some data into our table. So our table is SAPVIC product. So if you go here, so database tables, SAPVIC product. So if you check data preview, right click on this and open with data preview. So you will see all the columns. We have client, product ID, name, price, currency, created by, and created at. So but they are all empty, there's nothing inside. So we just set it up for testing. So we are not using entity manipulation language yet, so we can use entity manipulation language also to update or to insert information in our table. So for now, let's just do the normal way, test it. Yeah, so let's create a new class. Let's say ABAP class package, right click, create a new ABAP class. So insert data to the products table, internal table, create a work area, then just pass in your data to the work area. If you are not familiar with this, you can go to lesson 7 and check it out. So just Control save. save this. If you need the code for this, also just leave a comment in the comment section and I'll just paste it to you there. So Control activate, or Control F3 rather. So we need to execute. So on the console here, is a test data inserted successfully. So if you right click on the on the table, SAPVIC underscore products, let's go to open with data preview. Then you see that we have contents in the table, right? So this is our table. We have added things here, but in modern ABAP we do not want to access the table directly. So if we want to make changes, then we can also use the entity manipulation language to make our changes. This is how I'll go with this section. The next section will actually have to do with entity manipulation language. So it allows you to actually read, create, update, and delete business object data using special ABAP statements. So if you're interested in the video, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. So far what we learned in this video, what a business object is. We learned some data definition versus behavior definition. Also, we looked at business object projection. We looked at business object interfaces and how to analyze a business object. And thank you so much for watching. In coming videos, when I treat on entity manipulation language, we can also check on how to update data using the modify entities and also why commit entity is important. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.